the first question I'd ask is simply just, who is your customer? And to describe your customer. And so I'd be looking for a few things here. The first thing I'd be looking for is simply whether they actually talk to their customers about their needs, because that is one distinct advantage startups have over incumbents. I was inspired to ask this question from a quote I read from Chetan Puttagunta, current partner at Benchmark Capital. He said, quote, "I think one of the things that early stage companies have an advantage in these particular times is that they're able to engage with their end customers and have meaningful conversations around business values so much more clearly. Because if you're competing against, say, an incumbent that is a public company that is under tremendous pressure to hit quotas or whatever it is, the conversations quickly move to a sales-oriented conversation. Whereas if you're a startup, you all of a sudden have the ability to engage customers exactly along those business value propositions," end quote. So I really like this framework of his because, again, if you think about it, incumbents, large public companies, they have to hit their earnings growth every quarter. They have to hit those numbers. So every conversation with customers is, here's our product. How can we sell it to you? And that's the strategy of the firm. They hire all these sales reps to just sell that product. But if you're a startup, you don't have to take that sales-oriented approach. You're not like, here's the product. How do we sell it to you? Because you have the flexibility to be able to adjust the product easily if it's just you and a few people trying to get your first few customers. So your conversations can be, hey, customer A, here's our product. What do you think? And if the customer's like, oh, we currently use this product, we like it a little more because of this feature. So maybe if you add that feature, then we'd be a lot more interested. Startup can go back for 2 weeks, put in that feature, go back to the customer. Now the customer's like, wow, this is awesome. I'm totally going to use your product now. So it's just, startups have that advantage of selling the product on those value propositions rather than just focused on getting the sale done. You can be flexible with your product and change it and cater towards the customer's needs. And so I think that's really important for a startup to do in the early stage to land those early sales. So I'd want to know if the founder is currently doing that. So that'd be the first thing I'm looking for when I ask this question. The second thing I'd be looking for is I'd want to know what makes their customers happy. And a good indicator of product market fit is when their customers stop leaving the product or service. So they wouldn't leave if they're happy. So I'd want to know, what makes them happy, what satisfies their needs. And so I got the inspiration for this question from a Sarah Tavel quote. She says, quote, "GMV is not to say that it's not a useful measure, but it's not the thing you want to drive towards." So GMV, for those who don't know, gross merchandise value. Essentially, if you're a marketplace that sells shoes and someone sells a pair of shoes to another person for $100, maybe you take 5% as a company, so your revenue is $5, but the GMV is just the total value of the sale. So that would be the $100 that some person paid another person for. So it's just how companies track overall activity on their platform, essentially. But she says that's not what you should focus on. Instead, you should focus on creating happiness. And she says, happiness to me is something that incorporates the holistic experience that you create for your buyers and your sellers. It's almost the delta in the value you create and the value you capture from your marketplace. And she concludes by saying, product market fit isn't when your users stop complaining, it's when they stop leaving. So I love this framework of happiness is the delta in the value you create and the value you capture. I think that's a really good framework to think about it as founders, because you want to hit that sweet spot of you're giving so much value away to your customers and you're capturing some to build a sustainable business, but you want to hit that perfect sweet spot of we're creating so much value and we're capturing just enough to keep growing, but also to have our customers never leave because we're creating so much value. So that's product market fit. And so I'd want to know, that's the goal of a startup. Once you get there, you should be smooth sailing. So I want to know how the founders intend to get there. Like, I want them to know what makes their customers happy so they can cater towards that and cultivate that value creation and find that perfect delta so they can get that product market fit. So I'd want to know what makes their customers happy. One more thing I'd be looking for in this question is I'd be looking for whether they are driven and scrappy enough to do unscalable things early on. Because being extremely motivated is a key indicator of success for a founder. And depending on how scrappy they are, can be an indicator of how motivated they truly are to build this business into something great. And so this thought came to mind after reading a quote from former Benchmark partner Bill Gurley, where he says, quote, "One of my rules for getting a marketplace off the ground is to do tons of unscalable things. If you took 90% of the entrepreneurs that have been to business school and understand scaling, scaling as in the business gets cheaper to run as it grows. So, for example, retailing, you have to spend $10 for this 100 pack of plywood. I don't know, weird example, but whatever. Not a technology example. $10 for this 100 pack of plywood. Your distributor is willing to give you 1,000 pack of plywood for $80. So instead of paying $100 for 1,000 packs, you pay $80 for 1,000 packs. So like just that's scaling. Business gets cheaper as it grows. I hope that example works. Anyway, he says how entrepreneurs that have been to business school and understand scaling drives them nuts to do unscalable things. They'll say, oh, we can't do this. How will we ever do that at scale? And Gurley says, we're not going to do it at scale. This is a flywheel. We're trying to get the flywheel spinning. So the cost of our activity today is irrelevant to the marginal cost of the activity down the road because we're going to stop what we're doing. And he gives an example for Glassdoor, the company that employees can review their employer for prospective job candidates to look at and weigh their options as whether this is a firm they want to work for based on the reviews from employees. And so he says the first company that was reviewed for Glassdoor was Cisco. And the founders went to the Starbucks near Cisco with a pad of paper and interviewed people for reviews. And so there's a 0% chance that's going to be the long-term business effort, but you get to see the market. And those playbooks are precisely built around network effects, doing something very unscalable early on and getting it going bright and growing from strength. And then you have something that's way more alive. So I love this Glassdoor example because the founder of Glassdoor had founded Zillow before. So he's already super rich, had a successful company. He's older. He's in his 40s, I think, maybe late 30s, but very well-established guy. But he's still willing to go to a Starbucks and sit down with some young Cisco employees with a pen and paper and just write down their feelings about their employer from the early on. Like, if some multi-hundred millionaire is willing to do that, you should be willing to do those unscalable things, those most minuscule tasks to get your first users to understand your market and build from there. And so that's just the scrappiest thing you can do. Again, if you haven't listened to Sequoia episode, we talked about this for Sequoia of how the Airbnb founders went to New York with the minuscule budget they had to interview the few users they had on their platform to understand what they liked about the product and what they could make better. It's just those unscalable things early on to just build on top of the product and to make it better. Those are incredible indicators of success. So I don't know if I'd ask towards, when I ask who is their customer, I'd hope when they're describing that they'd explain some scrappy thing they did to find out who their customer is. Like, oh, well, we interviewed them at a Starbucks with a pen and paper and we know this about them. Like anything that's scrappy, I would love to hear. So that's what I'd be looking for. Again, to recap on the question, first question would be, who is your customer? To describe them, I'd want to know that they talk to their customers, and I'd want to know that they know their customers' value propositions, their needs. I'd want to know what makes their customers happy, and I'd want to see some sense of scrappiness in determining how they know what their customers want, like how they talk to them, how unscalable they're willing to get to talk to their customers and to fine tune their product for their target market. So that's question one.